Hey, welcome to 12-Tone Building Blocks, our monthly series about the fundamentals of music theory. We've already talked about what notes are and how we write them down, but really, music is about how those notes interact. That's what makes those characteristic emotional sounds. The relationship between two notes is called an interval, and they're the next step in understanding music. In previous videos, we've mentioned how we divide the octave up into 12 evenly spaced chunks called half steps. We could just use these to describe intervals, but counting out half steps gets clunky pretty fast, so instead we use a numbering system to describe the gaps. You can think of this as the number of letters you have to count to get from one note to the other. For instance, D to F takes 3 letters, D, E, and F, so we call it a third. D to B, on the other hand, takes 6 letters, D, E, F, G, A, and B, so it's a sixth. This continues all the way up to the octave, which uses 8 letters total, including a second D. But this part only cares about the letter name, not the accidentals. D flat to F is also a third, and D sharp to B is still a sixth. They're not the same sound, though. I mean, why would they be? They're different notes. So in addition to the numbers, we use what are called interval qualities to describe those differences. There are 5 primary qualities: perfect, major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Perfect intervals, as the name implies, are the most consonant ones. They sound incredibly stable and take very little effort to process. The octave is a perfect interval, as is the perfect fifth, which is 7 half steps, and the perfect fourth, which is 5. These form the basis of many of our most important sounds, but on their own, they're a bit boring. Major intervals, on the other hand, are a little more colorful. There are 4 of these: the major second, which is 2 half steps, the major third, which is 4, the major sixth, which is 9, and the major seventh, which is 11. Most of these are relatively consonant, but they're a little more complex, so they add a bit of extra flavor. The minor intervals are similar, but a little bit darker. Each one sits a half step below one of the major intervals. We have the minor seventh, 10 half steps wide, the minor sixth, which is 8, the minor third, which is 3, and the minor second, which is just a single half step. These tend to have a sadder, less consonant sound, making them useful for less pleasant music. So between perfect, major, and minor intervals, we've covered almost all the notes, but there's still one we haven't seen yet: the dreaded tritone, 6 half steps wide, which lives between the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. This actually serves to introduce both of our other qualities. A diminished interval is a half step smaller than any perfect or minor interval, which makes the tritone a diminished fifth. An augmented interval, on the other hand, is a half step larger than any perfect or major interval, so the tritone could also be called an augmented fourth. This is usually the only place where either of these qualities matter, but they're worth knowing about, just in case. As with notes, there's a lot of redundancy in interval names. Most of them can be called a couple different things. Here's a full list for reference. Feel free to pause and look over it. It'll be really helpful next time. Until then, thanks for watching. If you want to help make these videos possible, please consider supporting 12-Tone on Patreon. You can also join our mailing list for scans of all our episodes. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and keep on rockin'.